So hi everybody, I'm Sarah from Gut Reaction. Thank you to Thrive at Work for having me here. As you know, the theme of today's webinar is making and breaking eating habits in the workplace. So yeah, just to kick things off, I've got a couple of questions for you just to reflect on. Don't need to pop anything in the chat unless you want to, but yeah, just to reflect on these for starters. So firstly, have you noticed a connection between what you eat and how you feel in terms of your energy, your mood, or your ability to focus? Let's just reflect on that question. And next, if you've ever tried to change your eating habits, were you successful? So again, just pause and have a little think on those questions. So over the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to explore the potential to achieve lasting and sustainable eating habit improvement within the workplace, and set out some thoughts about how this could be best approached. So I'll be covering how eating patterns can affect people's health, energy, mood and performance at work and play, some of the science behind effective habit change as it relates to food and eating. I'll talk about why focusing on healthy eating in the workplace can be tricky, and then provide a fresh perspective on how businesses and organisations can approach it effectively. And finally, I plan to share some pointers to enable and empower people looking to make changes to their own eating habits. So as we said at the end of the webinar, I've allowed a little bit of time to answer your questions, and as Laura said, she'll be keeping an eye on that as we go as well. I can't see that while I'm presenting. So yeah, just before we jump in, I just wanted to give you a little background about who I am and the work I do for some context for you guys. So I now have over 11 years experience helping people who struggle with challenging eating patterns, basically to help them reduce stress around food, reset their habits and improve confidence in their bodies. In terms of professional qualifications, I'm a registered nutritional therapy practitioner and a certified intuitive eating counsellor. So basically this effectively means I'm trained to guide people on their journeys towards a healthier, more balanced approach to eating and self-care. And in our fast-paced corporate world, it's easy to fall into unhelpful eating habits, whether it's skipping meals or stress eating or following restrictive diets. So while nutritional therapy focuses on what to eat and how to harness nutrition for health purposes, working with an intuitive eating coach can help you to broaden your approach. So look at your eating habits through a broader lens, work on your mindset around food, and learn to listen and respond to your own body in ways that promote a peaceful long-term relationship with food. And prior to doing this work, I spent 9 years through my 20s in more of a corporate career in online communications. And during that time, I really struggled with fatigue, had many gut-related symptoms, and felt like I was reacting to everything that I was eating. So it was really my personal experiences which fueled an interest in nutrition and then inspired me to retrain. And over the past decade, I've worked with lots of businesses and organisations delivering nutrition-related workshops to groups of people to help inspire positive change around eating habits. But most of my work day to day is done on a one-to-one basis. And it's actually my professional knowledge and first-hand experience of helping people with their individual struggles that I wanted to draw on today, as I think, or I hope it can help those of you interested in promoting lasting behaviour change within a workplace wellbeing context too. So let's start with asking the question, what are habits anyway? So essentially, habits are the very small actions that we all do automatically and regularly with very little consideration or thought actually going into them. So from brushing our teeth in the morning to reaching for a snack when we're stressed, perhaps, habits are these behaviours that become stored and deeply ingrained in our brains through repetition and reinforcement. And how does this happen? Well, it's all about neural pathways. And as you repeat a behaviour, the neurons or the nerve cells and several parts of your brain fire together repeatedly. The connections between the neurons strengthen and eventually the circuits wire together, storing your response as a habit. So these neural pathways, I like to see them as grooves in the roadmaps of your brain. And the more frequently you travel any particular road, the stronger and more ingrained the behaviour becomes. And eventually the prefrontal cortex part of the brain stops participating so fully in the decision-making process, and it turns this over to our subconscious, facilitating that kind of ease and efficiency of repeated actions. And this is the same whether we consider the habit to be something that's good for us or bad for us. But obviously, if we're self-aware, we can better recognise when our unhelpful habit pathways aren't working for us, and then start to make some intentional changes. So why might we be particularly interested in eating habits, either at, well, let's start with this kind of individual or personal level. So it's quite likely that you all have an appreciation that how you nourish yourself every day is an integral part of your daily life, and it can even help give shape to your life. Our relationship with food is entwined with cultural identities, social dynamics, emotional well-being, as well as exerting an influence on our health and well-being and overall quality of life. Our relationship with food can actually be a wonderful source of pleasure and satisfaction in our lives, or for some it can become a stressor and potentially detract from well-being. And if we just look really high level at the science around the influence of the nutritional aspects of eating in relation to health and well-being, there's a consensus around a few key areas. So energy, how we eat in a day is one of the factors that can influence our overall energy and the extent to which our energy levels stay steady or fluctuate throughout the day, which will in turn influence our productivity. Mental well-being. So nutrition is also understood to influence both our mood regulation and cognitive health, including concentration levels, memory, and decision-making skills. Supportive nutrition can also help ensure our bodies have what they need to develop resilience against infections and illnesses, such as our immune health. And over time, our eating habits are known to be just one of many factors that can contribute to our long-term health outcomes. So certainly eating patterns that emphasize fruits and vegetables, whole grains, proteins, and natural fats have been associated with reduced risk of some of the major chronic diseases. So, when we're thinking about preventative health, it makes sense to consider nutrition in the mix. Okay, so how do we go about changing eating habits? So change isn't always easy, but it is entirely possible. And again, understanding more about the psychology behind habit formation can be hugely helpful. And as I touched on already, it really starts with the brain. So if you think about those neural pathways that I talked about as if they were these well-trodden paths through a forest, walking down an existing path is going to be much easier and more efficient than trying to carve out a new path through trees and the foliage, because it requires less effort to process and perform an existing behaviour than a new one. Your brain will want to move any action that you repeatedly do into a habit. However, the brain is flexible. You might have heard of the phrase neuroplasticity. So this is the brain's capacity to change and adapt due to experiences. So if we want to stop an old unhelpful habit, stop going down that old path, then we need to create and wire in a new habit that replaces it by intentionally carving out a new pathway that better supports our goals or what we really want to achieve for ourselves. And then we have to practice traveling down it until it becomes the default one instead. And of course, it's likely it's going to require significant effort at first. But performing a new behaviour with frequent repetition, eventually that old pathway will grow over and the new one becomes easy, efficient, and the more automatic one. So I think, you know, when we think about this process, you know, we can pretty much expect that changing habits is going to feel challenging and uncomfortable at first. And I just wanted to normalize that. And I think that understanding the neuroscience helps explain one of the reasons why focusing on, you know, changing one small habit at a time is usually advocated as one of the most effective ways to create new habits. It just takes intention and patience until the point that the brain takes over. Okay, so let's assume again that you're interested in making changes to your eating habits. Have you ever stopped to consider what is actually influencing your overall eating behaviour and your eating patterns at large? And there's various models and theories to help us understand our behaviours and habits, but the one I'm going to refer to now is called the COMB model. So COMB, and the C is capability. So this refers to our level of knowledge or education and our actual skills to perform a behaviour in the first place. So in the context of food and eating, this might include things like your kitchen skills or a level of supportive nutrition knowledge. And then if we also consider how things like poor sleep, high stress states, things like that impair our cognitive functions such as decision making, self-regulation and impulse control, then sleep quality and stress management might be considered as factors that also have potential to influence an individual's capability. Opportunity. So this refers to a range of aspects. So these are things including the time we have available, affordability, social aspects, convenience, our environment, cultural norms, the social support system around us. These are all the things that kind of wrap around our eating behaviours, enabling habits and patterns to be physically possible. So when thinking about the connection between our place of work, where we likely spend a lot of our time, and opportunity as it relates to eating habits, then we can consider the influence of organisational culture, access and availability of food, and cues or triggers for eating behaviours within the food environment. So for example, if we have to work late every night of the week and we're tired and feeling more stressed as a result, that kind of ambition to prepare and eat home-cooked food isn't necessarily impossible, but of course it's going to be a much harder reality to achieve than if we had our evenings available to us. And if the environment we're in provides easy access to convenience foods, these are naturally going to be the go-to accessible option. Motivation, another interesting one. So this refers to the conscious and unconscious cognitive processes that direct and inspire behaviour. So motivation drives the initial decision to make changes and sustains the effort required to maintain new behaviours over time. So in other words, it's what makes a behaviour attractive to you and moves you to take action and to keep taking that action again and again. And also consider that your motivation can be intrinsic or extrinsically driven. It's a mouthful. But intrinsic motivation is driven by internal rewards and personal satisfaction. So when individuals are intrinsically motivated, they might choose to engage in healthy eating because it aligns with their personal values and brings them a sense of well-being and joy. Meanwhile, extrinsic motivation is driven by external rewards or pressures such as wanting to eat in a certain way to seek approval from others, could be even competing in a challenge, for example. And extrinsic motivators can be effective in the short term, but unlike intrinsic motivators, they often don't sustain long-term behaviour change. As it says on the slide, motivation can also be reflective, which is when the higher cognitive processes around it are engaged, such as connecting with beliefs, values and goals. And then you've got this automatic motivation, which refers to automatic processes that are often outside of our awareness, such as emotional responses, habits, impulses and inhibitions. So as well as thinking about the role of reflective motivation as being quite an important one in creating and sustaining you know, the kind of eating habits that we want to engage in that we deem positive, it can be helpful to reflect on the role of automatic motivation in driving the habits we consider to be unhelpful or unhealthy as well. So, for example, if we don't get enough sleep, our energy is compromised, and our impulse is naturally or more naturally going to be to seek out high energy foods as conveniently as possible. And the actions that deliver short rewards is, you know, that's likely to win over the action that has the potential to deliver the long-term benefits or rewards we might be seeking ultimately for our health. So all three, capability, opportunity, and motivation, influence the shape of your current eating behaviours and patterns. So yeah, key thing here is if you're looking to make changes, kind of ensuring that all three are conducive to change or as conducive as possible is going to be really helpful. So yeah, another useful model to consider is something called the 4 laws of behaviour change. James Clear is the author of a book called Atomic Habits, and he describes a 4-step repeating pattern through which habits are created. He calls this the habit loop. So he urges us to consider what we can be doing at each step to increase the chances of successfully creating a new habit. And the process of habit formation can be divided into these 4 main stages: the cue, craving, response, and reward. So your cue, if you're thinking about this, it's the trigger, it's what happens immediately before the response. So, you know, that could be anything from a time of day, a feeling or a mood, something, you know, an environmental trigger. It could be a smell, an alarm clock, you know, lots of different cues. But if you want to make a new habit, how can you make that cue or trigger really obvious? The craving is that's referring to what urges you to act, or that motivation behind the habit. So yeah, if you're looking to make a new habit, how can you make sure it's going to be attractive to you in the moment? Response, that's the actual habit or behavior itself. So what you choose to do in response to the cue. And to create a new habit, can you try and make this as easy as possible and consider how it fits into your daily routine? Reward, this is what you gain in your life by taking action. And of course, there are likely long-term outcomes you may be hoping for if you're changing eating habits, and that'll be part of your motivation. But also, the more satisfying habits feel at the time that you do them, the more helpful this is in supporting your motivation and then you know, enabling that habit loop to repeat. So in a nutshell here, the human brain wants rewards and it needs cues when we're thinking about habits. Okay, so now we've explored some of the science behind eating habits. Let's identify some of the reasons why focusing on healthy eating in the workplace can be a tricky business. And if you're an employer invested in workplace wellbeing and are interested in how healthy eating fits into your strategy, see, it's logical to assume that if how your people eat plays such a broad and profound role in their lives and their health and their energy, then supporting them with healthy eating habits seems a valid venture. But how to go about this is where things can prove challenging, and efforts, I think, of even the most well-intentioned organisations can fall a little short. Just again, before I go into the details on the slide here, another reflective question for you guys is, you know, are you struggling to help your colleagues make any long-term changes around their eating habits at the moment? And also, if you have been successful in this area, then yeah, I would love to know, you know, at the end, when we have the questions, what's working where you are. So, okay, so with the behavioural science that I've covered in mind, I'm now going to share the main reasons why I believe healthy eating in the workplace often misses the mark. And in doing this, I think there's some really great clues as to how organisations could realign their efforts more successfully. So let's look at each. The first one is already on the slide. but it's focusing on broad or generic information about healthy eating. And in this situation, we might see an organisation putting out lots of information on nutrition and healthy eating tips in a bid to inform and inspire people to take action. It could be on an intranet or emails or through the provision of some talks, for example. And while this may seem like positive action, and it can be positive action because it's true that a knowledge gap can be an obstacle for some people, I think generic information about healthy eating risks missing the mark with many people for a number of reasons. So if we consider the potential diversity of people in any one workforce, variety of backgrounds, different challenges they'll be experiencing in their daily lives, income differences, different interests and hobbies, knowledge, education, and just like everybody has a fundamentally different relationship with food. So the risk is when we try to speak to everyone about healthy eating in a generalized way, the messages just can fail to speak to anyone at all. So tips may not be intrinsically motivating when people don't, when they don't help people to emotionally connect with why change is important to them personally in the context of their own life and well-being. And at Gut Reaction, I often see people who say they know what to eat, but they can't seem to make it happen. So there's many reasons for this, but lack of information is actually rarely one of them. There's a lot of noise around nutrition these days, which is great in many ways, as so many more people take an interest in the topic, but information alone doesn't lead to the healthy habits. A potential downside is that constant exposure to messages, particularly conflicting ones, this can be confusing, overwhelming, or it can just become like wallpaper. So when a business is disseminating nutrition related information to employees, another potential pitfall is asking an assigned wellness advocate within the organisation to prepare the content rather than commissioning someone with professional qualifications. And then why is that potentially problematic? Well, if you consider again that each individual has their own beliefs about health and their own relationship with food, whilst an assigned wellness advocate may have a wonderful interest in nutrition, if they're not professionally trained, it's likely their knowledge has been acquired from things they've enjoyed reading or watching or podcasts. And there's a risk that they'll present their personal beliefs as teachable regimes without the nuance and sensitivity to other people. Okay, so another little trap an organisation could fall into is centering healthy eating initiatives on individuals taking responsibility for their habits, but without also taking stock of just how influential the food environment and culture in the workplace is when it comes to habit change. So earlier I talked about the concept of opportunity in behaviour change, the role of the physical environments we operate in, and also the cues and the triggers that precipitate habits. So if you were to scan your office environment and the only food that's available to you is from vending machines and sweet bowls, then it's only natural that these are going to become a go-to for many people because ultimately they are the easiest option. And it's not just the food environment and availability of food that can have a direct impact on eating habits in the workplace. An organisation's culture, I believe, is likely to play an even greater role, directly and indirectly shaping its people's eating patterns. So, for example, if an organisation has a culture of arranging meetings over lunchtime or a stay late culture, or expects people to routinely work into their evenings to get stuff done, this inevitably will impact people's eating patterns and their stress levels, sleep quality and energy levels. And in turn, this will have a knock-on impact on their capability, motivation and opportunity to make the best eating choices for themselves during the working week. Okay, another one. So yes, there's definitely an opportunity for organisations to create a positive environment and culture that supports healthy eating habits. But interestingly, there may be a line. So research into eating behaviour reveals the value of choice and autonomy. So this is all about how intrinsic autonomous motivation is positively associated with natural, intuitive, healthy eating patterns, whilst controlled motivation from extrinsic pressures or mandates is negatively associated and far less likely to lead to sustainable outcomes. So yeah, interestingly, trying to make the food environment, too explicitly healthy or too virtuous, or pushing healthy eating initiatives in ways that feel controlled or pressured or policed, this has got potential to push some people further away than, rather than draw them in. So I guess what we need to remember is food is much more to people than just nutrition and the health aspects alone. It is also pleasure, it's cultural, social, emotional. And take any one group of people, it's not likely that everyone values health or healthy eating in the same way. And that's okay, that's normal. So to summarize this point, basically, I believe that, kind of more heavy-handed or militant approach to health eating in the workplace that challenges people's individual autonomy does have a potential to backfire. Okay, and then outside of the workplace, can we see the last point? Oh, yeah, there it is. So outside of the workplace, one of the most common reasons people cite to change their eating habits is to lose weight or to get healthier when it's code for losing weight. So why don't I like this one, you might be wondering. So there's actually many reasons why making weight loss a focus and a key marker of success of healthy eating habits is potentially problematic. So, okay, so when we chase intentional weight loss and we follow plans that aim to manipulate, change body shape or size, ironically, it can distract us from engaging with some of the more sustainable behaviours that better support and promote overall health and well-being over time. And what's worse is that weight-centric approaches to eating can pull people into a troubling dieting mentality that can directly compromise health and well-being. What we know from the research available in this area is that just about any diet plan can deliver short-term results in controlled conditions. But for the overwhelming majority of people, results don't last beyond 5 years. And it may be a surprise for many of you to hear that the most common outcome of intentional weight loss approaches is diet cycling and long-term weight gain. Plus, it can also set the scene for a difficult relationship with food and a raft of disordered eating habits. Individuals may start to tie their sense of self-worth to their ability to lose weight, leading to feelings of failure and inadequacy when weight loss goals are not met. So yeah, I believe in personal autonomy around our bodies. So if you choose to diet, of course, that's your call. But when people start to understand that restrictive dieting-like behaviours are nearly always destined for long-term failure and can have potentially harmful side effects, then is it any wonder that so many people find losing weight such a bind? So my message here for those of you focusing on workplace well-being is really one to encourage you not to bring diet culture into those efforts, and instead keep the focus on supporting healthy behaviours, regardless of their potential impact on people's body weight. Okay, so those were the challenges, or some of the challenges and the pitfalls I believe organisations face. So now let's look at some of the things you could do positively and to support sustainable eating habits in the workplace. So zooming out to this organisational level, first of all, you could take some time to review and understand how your current culture might be directly and indirectly influencing people's relationship with food and their eating patterns, and identify any opportunities or wiggle room to improve this. And within this evaluation, consider your employees' work-life balance and the impact on people's sleep and stress levels. As I've mentioned, these are going to have a huge bearing on their daily energy, mood, and their capacity to make nourishing choices for themselves. And you might also consider creating a policy of not organising meetings over lunchtimes. It's just one example. Again, you could take some time to review and identify opportunities to make healthier eating habits easier for people. So thinking about the food environment and making, these, healthier eating habits easier whilst opening up more choice for people rather than limiting it. So some examples here: if you're going to provide sweets on a front desk, can you also provide a fruit bowl too? And if you want to emphasize the fruit, then simply make it a little bit more prominent, as the likelihood is that would help the take up. If you have a canteen, can you work with suppliers so that both taste and nutrition are factored into the menu, and aspire to offer as diverse and satisfying a menu as possible? This doesn't mean creating, an exclusive menu of, I don't know, Buddha bowls and kale salads and goji berries, but, just really paying some extra care to making sure there is variety in the food that's available. And can you also consider what spaces are available for your people to step away from their desks so they can eat at tables, perhaps with others, in a comfortable, inviting setting? Okay, at a team level. So consider the information and initiatives you provide around healthy eating. Sense check that what is being conveyed promotes sustainable eating habits for health, rather than perpetuates diet culture, and has potential for some body shaming, because it's focusing on those weight-centric behaviours that I talked about. So really, again, checking that information is promoting true sustainable eating habits for health. If you run healthy eating workshops or challenges, I think focusing on practical skill building aspects is really useful, such as meal planning, and also the hands-on aspects of food prep and cookery, for example. You could also look to use suppliers that will help create workshops and challenges that educate about habits and behaviour change, and encourage people to reflect on their own eating habits and their own lifestyles and pick for themselves what they want to work on. And as we've talked about, when people reflect on their personal motivation and can align their habits with that, this will lead to more sustainable, meaningful behaviour change. And it fosters that sense of autonomy and empowerment. People feel more in control of their choices and less likely to be swayed by fads and other unhelpful diet trends. If you're providing healthy eating content and tips to employees, then I do suggest to get the support of a nutrition professional, or if you're going to get someone in the organisation to write about these things, just don't include any unqualified nutritional advice that could sound preachy or be misplaced. Maybe focus on simple recipe ideas, sharing those, some nice inspirational tips, and just sense check again, is this actually helpful to other people? And then at an individual level, as an organisation, can you provide the time and space for people's personal development? It could be things such as mindfulness skills, time management and stress management. Can you facilitate access to personal health and nutrition coaching through EAP schemes, for example, through which people can develop their mindset around food, connect with their intrinsic motivation for change, decide for themselves which lifestyle and eating habits they want to make or break, and get the support they need to actually help them make some positive changes. And finally, if people do have health concerns that nutrition can help support, then can you facilitate access to personalised nutritional therapy? So as we've explored, changing our personal eating habits isn't a quick and easy win. And, focusing on healthy eating as part of workplace wellbeing isn't a quick or easy win either. But through the measures I've outlined, I believe it is possible to have a really positive impact. So just to summarise the last few slides, these things were targeting the overall organisational culture, adapting this in any ways possible just to be more conducive to balanced eating patterns, and other positive lifestyle habits that influence the eating patterns, considering the food environment, and then also facilitating access to individualised and practical support at a group and individual level, things that empower people to make change a reality in their own lives. So whilst it can be hard to unpick and quantify the success of the approaches I've talked about in terms of employee healthcare costs, productivity, and things like reduced absenteeism, I believe it makes sense that there are these potential gains to an organisation in the long term. And some more immediate potential benefits of this approach would be that by proactively valuing and supporting employees' work-life balance, morale, satisfaction, and overall wellness in the ways I've outlined, an organisation could increase employee engagement and retention, attract talent, and enhance its reputation as a caring and responsible employer. Okay, so a little sip there, but yeah, finally, as my work here at Gut Reaction is primarily about guiding and coaching individuals, I wanted to finish off my talk today with 3 pointers for those of you listening who want to create some positive change in relation to your own eating habits. So I've often heard people, particularly those in larger organisations, say they are constantly surrounded by birthday cake and sweet treats that other people have brought into work. And once they eat a little of something sweet, they simply can't stop. Now, this is tricky because I don't believe that the food that employees bring into work is the organisation's responsibility, and nor should it be policed. So really, if you struggle with over-consuming certain foods at work, when those cues, when those cues to trigger eating feel like they're all around you, what could you do differently? So firstly, just consider how it may not all be about the food itself. So your own relationship to certain foods could be influencing how you behave around them too. So many people who feel out of control around food admit they have this all or nothing thinking going on about food. And this really common tendency has connections with the diet culture mentality I referred to earlier, whether you're either kind of following a plan or you're not. So when we have a dichotomous mindset, we can kind of fall into this trap of thinking, we need to do healthy eating perfectly, or we're not going to do it at all. We could be naughty now because we will be good later. We can also categorize foods as good or bad, which can lead to feelings of guilt and shame when consuming the bad foods and attempts to cut them out of the diet completely. The thing is, such rigidity and restriction can in turn provoke overeating when the self-imposed rules are inevitably broken. It's that kind of, I've blown it now, so I might as well eat the whole packet, I might as well carry on. And this can fuel a vicious cycle of deprivation and excess. So if this is kind of resonating with you, then one starting point is to start gently observing those unhelpful all or nothing thoughts when they arise for you. And just patiently start to challenge yourself to let go of them rather than to get hooked by them and to act on them. There's always a choice there. So this is a kind of mindfulness-based approach that I talk to people about in my private practice. But just by doing this, you really can start to create a space for different choices in the moment and start cultivating a more balanced approach that allows for flexibility and enjoyment in your diet and supports that kind of healthier, long-term, peaceful approach to food. Next pointer. So when we eat while focused on other tasks, such as working on documents, checking our emails, this can really diminish our sensory experience of food, making it harder to achieve any real sense of enjoyment or satisfaction from it. And when we miss out on satisfaction from food, the chances are that we increase the likelihood of seeking out additional snacks later. So taking a break from your desk and other tasks while you eat better enables you to engage more fully with the food that you're eating, enhancing your enjoyment and improving your appetite regulation. And when we slow down and are better connected with our experience of eating, we also support the gut-brain connection and can improve our digestive processes. And this in turn means you may be less vulnerable to things like feeling bloated in the afternoons or having an energy dip after eating. And the last pointer here, so you may have heard the saying, failing to plan is planning to fail, or perhaps the saying, goals without a plan are just wishes. So this is when we know there are things that we want to do, but we haven't fully committed to making them a reality yet. And it's the same with food. So if, you know, if the current lunch and snack options available to you during your working days aren't what you personally find nourishing and satisfying, then you may need to work on your food planning skills, and basically just help ensure for yourself that what you really want to eat is available to you when you want to eat it. And in busy working lives, food planning, shopping, and any related preparation you might need to do must be factored into a diary. Or it's so easy for these things to get bumped down the to-do list, which in turn leaves you vulnerable to the quick fixes and the convenience options. And like any habit, food planning is something that can be worked on. So as I talked about at the start, change with habits, it can feel really uncomfortable when we're trying to engage with new habits. And that should be expected. That's normal. But with intention and some consistency behind us, we can create those new pathways. And at some point, your brain will take over and the habits will flow more easily. So finally, I use this quote a lot in my presentations, but I wanted to share it with you and just emphasize that change is possible when it comes to eating habits. And I do see that positive improvement firsthand all the time through my work. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. It's been a real pleasure to offer you this information, and I hope the content that I've shared might be helpful to you all in some way.